Dear ladies and gentlemen, could I ask you to take your seats and we continue with the second panel of today that will be on science diplomacy more in specific. We have a number of eminent speakers again on this panel. I would like to thank you for being so helpful and tweeting and retweeting our tweets from the first session. So I would like to ask you then again to be as nice in the second session, still mentioning us at EMUNI and using the hashtag science diplomacy. Also, I would like to ask you, in your folders, there is a questionnaire that we would be happy if you could fill in and leave at the reception desk. It will help us with the development of our journal, the International Journal of Euro-Mediterranean Studies. I think we're all ready. I would like to present the moderator of this panel will be Professor Dr. Abdelhamid El-Zohairi, the president of EMUNI, and I give the floor to him.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our second panel on the EMUNI Conference on Science Diplomacy. Before we start, I would just like to lay down some guidelines for the panelists today in the interest of hearing from the audience, who are by no means, by the way, we're very happy and privileged to have such an eminent audience with us today of university rectors, vice rectors, and policymakers and senior administrators in their institutions, and would like to hear their views and comments, which will definitely enrich the conference and help us reach some concrete recommendations that will be shared with you tonight. So, putting this in mind, I would like to ask the panelists to please limit their introductory remarks to 5 minutes, and then there will be final remarks of 3 minutes. I understand that some panelists would like to show PowerPoint presentations, but as per our guidelines, please be very concise, short, limited to the 5 minutes again, and only in the introductory remarks, not in the closing remarks. And please excuse me, because I might have to cut off any of you who will continue beyond 5 minutes, and I'm apologizing from the start about doing this. Today we have a group of eminent panelists, and I'm sure that their views and comments and inputs will enrich the recommendations of this conference. And this panel is focused on science diplomacy. So we started the first panel, maybe it was not as much focused on science diplomacy. Of course, it touched upon it in many aspects, but now with this panel we are focusing more on science diplomacy for Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. And we have a group of diverse eminent panelists I'm going to introduce before everyone in turn, before they speak. And then we will finish the introductory remarks. There will be questions from the audience and from me, and then we will then proceed to the concluding remarks at the end of the panel. And I remind you again, please tweet. This session is broadcasted live on our website, and also your tweets will be broadcasted on this screen. So we encourage you all to tweet so that we can maybe also touch upon some of the interesting tweets that are going to be tweeted during the session. Our first speaker is Professor Nabil Ayad. He's the director of the Academy of Diplomacy and International Governance in Loughborough University, London. He is also a member of the APCO's International Advisory Council, and he was founder, director, and rector of the London Academy of Diplomacy, University of East Anglia, and was director of the External Relations and Development. Professor Ayad held the ambassadorial role for the University of East Anglia and the INTO University Partnership, and acted as supervisor of PhD research degrees at the School of Political, Social, and International Studies. He's currently member of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and an associate member of the London Diplomatic Association. Professor Ayad, the floor is yours. Please. Yes. this is 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 5 minutes only? Okay. Well, as King Ghadiri VIII told his wives, don't worry, I won't keep you long. We heard a great deal this morning about science and diplomacy, or is it diplomacy and science? There was a bit confusion. There was no conclusion about which one should come first. When diplomacy started to take form in the 17th century, the skills and knowledge which diplomats, they used to call them modern diplomats at that time, were as follows. A diplomat, he should be a trained theologian. I say he because there was no she at that time. Well-versed in Aristotle and Plato, an expert in mathematics and physics, an expert in civil law, able to speak and write Latin, Greek, Spanish, and German, and preferably had a taste for poetry. That was the scene in the 17th century, when diplomats were more involved in what we call matrimonial diplomacy. Diplomats used to go around Europe trying to find husbands and wives for the sons and daughters of head of state at that time. Diplomacy has changed today. Diplomats have become managers of globalization. And under globalization, as you know, come many subjects and issues. But what are the factors and actors which dominate the international scene today? Today we are living in the age of heteropolarity. It's no longer unipolar, bipolar, it is multipolar, mixing diplomacy and science. We talk about environmental diplomacy. The current international scene is dominated by fear. Governments are afraid of something. Organizations are afraid of something. We as individuals are afraid of something. All you need to do is to go to an airport and you can see all these factors. Globalization was fueled by technology. Technology was is influenced by the media. International security today, we are moving from bullets and bombs to bits and bytes. Bits and bytes are the norm of cyber security today. Cyber security is science. In December 2013, I attended the first conference on cybersecurity and science diplomacy. It was held in Washington by the Center for Science Diplomacy, which is part of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. That was December 13. You can go to the website and see many articles written about science diplomacy. I mean, in diplomacy, in science, we use technology. In 1996, I organized a conference entitled, Are Diplomats Really Necessary? And I did that in the light of two emerging patterns at that time. The impact of information technology on diplomacy. Is technology going to replace diplomats or be his latest communication tool? The other emerging pattern at that time was the tendency towards privatizing diplomacy. why do we need embassies? Ambassadors, diplomats live extravagant life, alternating between protocol and alcohol, and they end up with too much cholesterol. Well, you can see where science comes in with the cholesterol. But when we speak about science diplomacy, we are talking about the need for developing what I call international policy. Science diplomacy has become an important factor in the management of state, an important factor, tool in foreign policy and public diplomacy. So today we are talking about diplomacy for science, or science for diplomacy, or diplomacy and science, diplomacy and technology, diplomacy in science. All these actors, factors interplay. So we need to formulate appropriate responses for all these matters because of the complex interaction amongst these matters. Now, was a talk about politicians don't read. No. Politicians, ministers are always briefed. Unless they are involved in a sex scandal, then they start reading. So we have to appreciate the complex interactions between bureaucratic policies, public policy, and political power within the context of science and diplomacy. Well, I have a long article which I will send to the president to get it published, I hope. So I will stop here and perhaps we can continue the debate later on. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Ayad. I take from your introductory speech an important, apart of course of the fact that diplomats lead extravagant lives alternating between protocol and alcohol, I would also take this point on what are we talking about exactly? Are we discussing diplomacy for science, diplomacy in science, or science for diplomacy, or science in diplomacy? I think they all are different faces of the same coin of science diplomacy. And our next speaker will demonstrate this very well because today, if you read the introductory remarks in your booklet about our conference, we said that we want to focus on science diplomacy in practice and not only talk about it, but exercise it. And today we have the very good opportunity of exercising science diplomacy in practice. First, we have two eminent speakers who represent their countries on a very important science diplomacy initiative, which is SESAME. You are going to hear about SESAME, which is a synchrotron in Jordan, modeled after the CERN initiative for the EU. And we also have on the panel, and by coincidence they are speaking in the same, in one after the other in succession, an Israeli, a Palestinian, and an Iranian. So if this is not science diplomacy in practice, what it is? I would like now to give the floor to Professor Rabinovici. He's the co-president, the co-vice president of Synchrotron-light for experimental science and applications in the Middle East, SESAME. And he is also the Blaise Pascal chair holder at the University of Pierre de Marie Curie, Paris 6. He's an emeritus professor of physics at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His area of research is theoretical high energy physics, in particular quantum field theory and string theory. Having extensively published in the field, he was visiting professor at the UC Berkeley and visiting scholar at the KITP. Professor Rabinovici was a fellow at the AIS Princeton and visiting professor at Michigan Ann Arbor. And among others, He also works with several European institutions, including CERN. He held a Kramer's professorship at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and many other professors, many other institutions. He has received a number of international awards and was director of the Israeli Institute for Advanced Studies. He's the Israeli delegate to CERN and SESAME councils, and the founder of SESAME. Professor Rabinovici, please.
Thank you. So today I'm going to take you to a place where I think scientists took governments to a place that they didn't believe they would reach. I believe personally, on a personal level, that as scientists we were blessed with certain talents and that we have to give them back to society. And one of our talents is that we speak in one language, which is the language of science. And the other is we have the ability to collaborate. I don't believe that scientists are, as humans, any better than any other human. But I think that given what I've said before, it is our duty at least to try to the utmost to serve as a bridge of understanding in regions where that is needed. And as our chair, as our moderator said, and as Hani and Elal said before and was said by others, I'm going to discuss an institute which is modeled also by the CERN idea. Now, SESAME is a light source of very high quality. There is nothing like this in the Middle East, nothing near that. It's being built in Jordan. It hopefully will start running in 2016, if not in 2017. Its seeds were actually sown at CERN, as Hani Halal again mentioned, who is one of the founders of SESAME, in Trieste at ICTP, not far away from here, and in a Bedouin tent in Dahab, Egypt, where again the ideas were coming up. Now the countries which are collaborating at the governmental level are Cyprus, Egypt, Iran, Israel, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, Pakistan, and Turkey. In the process of building this light source, high quality light source, we had to reach some science policy decisions. One dilemma is when you do science for peace, do you have a bottom-up approach? Namely, the scientists come and say, these are projects we want to work on. They will be small projects. Or would you like a up-bottom approach where the governments decide what is important? And this is a cause, you can discuss a lot about it. It is clear that in my region, you need an umbrella. And an umbrella means it has to be up-down. However, what one should not compromise, and that's another science and policy decision, is that it has to be of the highest quality. If one does a collaboration which is mediocre, better not do it at all. And I think that is very important. And as my colleague sitting to my left, Professor Salman, said on an interview on television before an empty hall at the time, this is a real thing. And I think it is really demonstrating to be a real thing. Now, what are the key ingredients that are needed? First of all, everybody must be able to contribute and everybody must be able to benefit. If it's not built in such a way, I don't think it would work. And I think the fact that we are working on this for so many years together while many things collapsed in the region shows that everybody thinks he may contribute and everybody thinks he may benefit. Now, in order to achieve this, the scientific answer was built to take a light source. A light source has a potential of creating a critical or attracting a critical mass of scientists in our region. It has a very large range of application. It starts from pharmaceutical, nanotechnology, into biology, chemistry, and physics. And this, the idea of Voss and Winnick have suggested to build a defunct German machine to the region. This was against what I told you before, that we must do high quality science, but we needed to use it in order to build first the administrative structure, because if you heard the list of names, which I will repeat again, Cyprus, Egypt, Iran, Israel, Jordan, Palestinian Authority, Pakistan, and Turkey, you realize how complicated it is just to answer the administrative challenge. Once this was done, we have actually changed and said we need to build a new machine. and the new machine is a challenge financially, and to this challenge Israel, Jordan, Iran and Turkey have risen, and each is given $5 million over a period of 4 years. This is, I think, stimulated also the European Union, which has given an extra €5 million for the project through CERN, which is playing a key role, and Italy, your neighbor here to the north, has also decided to contribute $5 million. So I think that what we are doing, we are offering an alternative for the young generation, which Hani Halal talked about, to the hate which has enough agents in the region. Now I'm ending. I would like to show you, we are talking about the young people of the region. I would like to show you what the young people of the region are saying. So if you please, this is a BBC clip from TV. Unfortunately, BBC does not allow to take anything, only you have to downstream. So it will start with an ad. I apologize. You're not getting any money for the ad. And then you just see them. And after that, I finished.
Aspects in terms of bringing science here, in terms of bringing a line of communication, maybe to not bring peace to the region.
It is very valuable and it is very important for the region because we can, one country cannot afford to have a single synchrotron machine.
Here we are as scientists, and scientists usually belong to the humanity, not to the country. I understand that there are some political use of science, but we are not here for political use of science, we are here for science.
So what we do here can be used in many fields, including electronics, including engineering, including material science, so it will have many applications from cement to health.
What we hope is that science will open the door to further understandings concerning other issues. Okay? This is what we hope. I mean, we will deal with things, and somehow we will open the door for at least 4 years or 4 centuries.
Iranian and Palestinians and Pakistanians scientists are my friends because they are scientists, so we have a common ground. The common ground is very liquid. We don't care about what we are making when the federal to this game. We don't care about what we want to care about planning.
So I'm sorry about the quality of the sound. What each of these people says, and each of them represents one of the countries which I mentioned, is how important they view the fact that one brings a modern scientific machine to the area. Some of them were thinking only in terms of science, and some of them said they also believe it will be a bridge for understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rabinovici, and for enlightening us on the essence of this very important initiative, SESAME. And I'm glad to hear that the European Union is now supporting SESAME through CERN. And I have heard actually in a recent event someone from CERN, a researcher at CERN, who dedicated his whole talking points on SESAME and how much cooperation is going on between the two organizations. And definitely this is a very good example of science diplomacy in practice. Now we move to the other professor who's also going to talk about SESAME, now from Palestine. And I believe that we are going to hear now from the two sides who are normally in conflict, but when they go to SESAME in Amman, they are working together. And this is a very good example of how science can bring people together. This is Professor Salman Salman. He's a professor at Al-Quds University. He's also director of Al-Quds Nuclear Physics Laboratory, member of the SESAME Council and Technical Committee member, and vice president of the PNC. He was awarded the Fulbright Scholarship in 1987, the Islamic Development Bank Scholarship in 1992, and Excellent Leadership Award in 2014. Professor Salman was founding director of Al-Quds ULIC Cooperation and chairman of the SESAME Finance Committee. He was visiting professor with Cornell. He's a EC member of the Palestinian Education Council and founding president of the Technical Development Cooperation. Professor Salman's current research includes accelerators and synchrotrons, solar energy, microwave radiation, quantum mechanics, spin electronics, nuclear medicine, and physics of consciousness. You have to explain to us what's this physics of consciousness. He is involved in projects related to development, politics, philosophy, and sociology. He authored studies including questions about modernity, 1, 2, and 3 state confederation, investment for development in Palestine, UNCTAD, evolution of societies based on physics laws, questions on education, and a housing plan for Palestine. Professor Salman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm pleased Eliezer will save me a lot of the minutes because he covered a good part of it. So I will focus actually on two other things. One is just to complete some points about SESAME. Then I will try to give you other experiences with the European Union and with states' bilateral agreements within the European. So that may affect also this impact. Concerning SESAME, I think Eliezer put the points on prospect, and I think the main idea was we have to convince the politicians to accept it. If we propose at the beginning, we need 100 million to build the machine, nobody will have covered it. So the sale was this way. This is a donation from Germany. You don't need to pay anything, so but just help us to accept the place. Then we made a competition, so everybody was competing. We ended up having it. Then Jordan paid the whole building, so 10 million were covered directly. Then the next step was right away. I mean, 2001, we met, and I'm a part of the technical committee, so we changed the design fully. And we only utilized 8 million of the machine, the old machine, and we have to raise another 90 million. At the beginning, it was near impossible. Nobody believed in it. But we were able to do it, and we made many proposals, and many countries were involved in it, and eventually we are covering 100 million now, which includes the machine and the building and everything. So it was a very successful scientists doing politics or diplomacy. We're doing it very hardly, certainly in not very friendly circumstances, because the member states are so in conflict with each other. Everybody is basically against the other. And still, we were able to sell it, and the main point was this, that we will do science and the good science, so everybody will benefit from it. Now, peace as a result of science, we will be very happy to do that, but we are not going to undermine the scientific value for the sake of just doing political maneuvering. So we are trying to do a balance between the two. Because if you really increase the political component, you kill it. If you emphasize strongly on science, then nobody will be helping you as politicians. So you really have to play a good balance. The second experience which I have with European Union was in the 80s, actually. I was a founder of a corporation to do technical development for Palestine. That time there was no state in Palestine, and there was no Palestinian Authority. At that time, the funding used to be 30 million, 40 million, maybe a year from the whole European Council or Commission. And we were able to actually take over 80% of the funding provided by the EU for the Palestinians by providing special plan to really help a wide structure of the society instead of going to certain projects. And the third experience was doing a collaboration with one state in Europe, which is basically Germany. We have created a collaboration with a center, well-known center in Germany called Jülich Center. And we have already done that for the past 3 years. And it turned out that it has different politics associated with it. So from these three components, I think I can make some recommendation for the EMUNI, maybe policy. I'm not claiming to be giving the full guide, but I think I will have some input maybe that will be useful. EMUNI seems to me has very strong points, 3 strong points. One, they are actually created as a product, as a result of an initiative by the EU itself. So they are really in a good position. 2, Slovenia specifically as a state are putting a lot of emphasis to utilize EMUNI to take their own national role within the EU. That's another strong, very strong point. especially because of the location. A third point, the South are contributing very strongly in the structure of it. The president now is from Egypt. Before that, it was from Malta. So it seems to me there's a very strong interest built in the structure of EMUNI. So you can really do a very good job. From the SESAME experience, I think maybe you can take a very strong point that you have to do it scientists as politicians, not the other way around. Don't wait for the politicians to help you. You have to really to create your own policy. But then, you have much simpler conditions than ours. We have nations who are against each other. For your case, you don't have a problem. Most members are universities, so will be happy to contribute. But you have to do it also correctly. You have to attract them for each university to feel they will really benefit from this. If it's eventually, I am a member, but I'm not benefiting, they will leave. So I think that's a very strong point you have to be considered. And in my opinion, one of the very, very productive things is just to utilize the same machine which were used to build EMUNI itself. Basically to emphasize on collaborations with the European states through European Union funding. You have a very good program now, Horizon 2020, over $70 billion available. And EMUNI can do a good job in this. Many of the universities in the South don't know how to do it. Sometimes they do have some access, but they don't really know how to make the collection. And many of the projects are actually funded jointly by many universities from at least 3 or 4 countries in Europe and the Middle East. So that will require a very hard searching for good and matching. EMUNI can do this fully, I think. And I recommend very strongly that you really emphasize this. And I'm willing to send you a proposal how to do this activity. A third point about Slovenia itself, I think Slovenia are looking very forward to benefit from this. And it seems to me everybody in the government is supporting you. So you really have to provide something in return. So they shouldn't feel they are just left out. As you said it yesterday, they have to pay for the travel of the others. They must benefit from it. And so this is really the tricky point. You have to make everybody feels he is benefiting and he will lose if he leaves, and that will make life much easier. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Salman. And I appreciate your recommendations for EMUNI, which we'll definitely take very seriously on board. And I see EMUNI as SESAME is also an initiative that was created for science diplomacy, because at the heart of EMUNI's mission is to enhance the exchange of students and faculty members across the shores of the Mediterranean, and as its final target is to bring peace and prosperity to the region. So this is definitely a science diplomacy initiative which has a lot of potential synergies with SESAME, and for this reason I think today maybe we should sit down and discuss together with you and Professor Rabinovici also how we can align our objectives for the two initiatives. We now move to another very interesting, I have to say, speaker, because until now we didn't have before Iran as an active member in EMUNI initiatives, and SESAME too, of course, and we didn't have Iran as an active also player with the EU. And I'm glad here to be able to welcome Mr. Rouhollah Ghadiri, and he is representing Iran today, and he is actually also the consortium partner from Iran in the Merit project, which will kick off tomorrow. So we are very happy to have him with us. Mr. Ghadiri is the Executive Director of the Iranian Association for Management of Technology, IRAMOT, and Research Fellow at the Presidential Technology Studies Institute. He has a PhD and he got his Bachelor in Industrial Management, Shahid Beheshti University. His Master in Management of Technology in University of Alame Tabatabai, and his PhD on Future Studies, University of Tehran. His expertise is on science and technology management and policy making, foresight and future studies. He managed a lot of research projects in the field of management of technology and foresight in Iran, and is the author of many books and articles in these fields in Farsi language. He is member of the board of the most important event in the field of management of technology in Iran, the International Annual Conference on Management of Technology, known as IRAMOT 2015, IRAMOT 14 and 13, etc. And I'm glad here to say that maybe he will say it already, but that this international event on the management of technology is a very good event to coordinate and synergize our efforts, and hopefully we can organize maybe a merit project activity alongside this event in Iran, and it will be a very good opportunity to also engage the Iranian community on technology and innovation in our efforts in the merit project. Mr. Ghadiri, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Please, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I would like to thank Professor Abdulhamid and his colleagues for inviting me. Thank you. I'm just telling you about Iran's experience in science and technology diplomacy and Iran's huge potential in this area. Sorry, I should go fast because I have a lot of slides and we have just 5 minutes. Okay, you can have basic information about Iran. Iran has more than 77 million people, and most of them are young people. More than 60% of them are below 30. Literacy rate is more than 86%. And let me go through my slides. All of us know about the significance of S&T to resolve the world's problems, different challenges of the world. We know about the important role of S&T in the development of the countries, because especially the countries of south part of the world. And all countries need to have S&T diplomacy for the improvement of nation welfare. And one of the professors yesterday say that diplomacy is sending the people to the hell, and this is the definition for science diplomacy. The use of scientific and technological collaboration among countries to address common problems and to build constructive international partnership. So I want to say about the challenges and opportunities in this regard. We know about the renovating procedures and essential of S&T, especially advanced science and technologies in developing countries. We should consider about development and transfer of these technologies. They need their specific institutional structures. We should be care about role of government and private sectors in doing this. I think there are huge potential for learning from each other in this regard. For example, we did a study about the high-tech export in the world in Iran, and we saw the pharmaceutical export competitiveness in Slovenia is very high in the world, and we have more than 100 companies, private and government companies in Iran. We can learn from each other in this sector and other sector, of course. I think developing countries should come out of the geographic shares and consider S&T cooperation, new division of labor, and the creation of new mass market as part of their overall agenda to achieve development. To develop and promote their indigenous technologies, these countries request to establish international communication and enter to these communications. I want to say you about the Iran situation in science and technology diplomacy. We have Iran's national vision document that is targeted to 2025. It puts emphasis on promoting bilateral and multilateral cooperation in science and technology, and there is a good space for promoting these collaborations. In almost all universities, international scientific cooperation offices have been established during the last years, and to adopt an appropriate approach towards international joint research and development activities. Deployment of science attaches or science counselors, technology counselors in foreign embassies of Iran is started in the last years. It's a good tool for science diplomacy, for technology diplomacy in different countries. We have 2 in Russia, 2 in China, India, UK, and other countries. In May 2012, we had a workshop on science and technology diplomacy for developing countries and the essentials of this for these countries with the NAM Science and Technology Center in Tehran. Of course, we established Office of Science and Technology Cooperation in Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You know, in the diplomacy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a more important role in this regard. Of course, for training the diplomats in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we started some courses on science and technology and the importance of that in negotiation with different countries. If I want to say about the huge potential of Iran for cooperation in science, technology, and innovation, I should show you that we have a good rank in the world in different science and technology fields based, of course, based on the number of publications. For example, in 2013, in nanotechnology, Iran has a rank of 7 in the world, and it has a good potential for collaboration. Or in energy engineering and power technology, we have the rank of 6 in the world, and it's a good and huge potential for future collaboration. In this picture, you can show the growth and the rate of the publications in ISI database. That in 2011, Iran has the most growth in the world. It was about 20%, you can see at the last one. And it's the rate of the growth in ISI publication in different science and technology fields of Iran. It has a good growth in recent years because of the huge investment of the government. And you can see in this slide the number of students, university students. We have more than 4 million university students in Iran, and of course more than 13 million students under university, elementary and secondary schools, and there are a huge potential for collaborations. You can see the number of science and technology parks in Iran. It's about 33. In this slide, you can have more information about that. We have more than 500 research centers, more than 800 universities that are funded by the government, and universities and private sector universities and education centers are more than are about 700 universities. We have science and technology parks, about 33, and technology incubators, more than 100 incubators for developing technology. It's the last slide, okay? 2 last slides, of course. I have some suggestion about learning from each other by these actions, doing joint project like Mrad. Mrad is really science diplomacy in practice. We can have these projects in other areas, in sectors or in STI section. We can have holding joint conferences. I distribute the flyer of our international conference in Iran. It's annual international conferences. Each December, we're going to be holding Kish Island in the south of Iran. You are all invited to the conference. We can have a student and professor exchange. I know this is usual for European countries, but this is not usual for Iran collaborations. We can have some programs on this and organizing joint international PhD academies or summer school. And main challenges that I want, it's last slide, of course. There are some international sanctions against Iran it's really a main constraint for collaborating activities for future collaborations. We hope that our negotiations with the West is going to solve these sanctions. We have weak ties between Iran and EU RTDI institutes, research, technology, development, innovation institutes. We have difficulties raised from political issues, of course. For example, visa issuance, money transfer, spy labels that may be some put on scientists. And that was the Iran potentials. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ghadiri, for this informative presentation on the potential of Iran. And I have witnessed this personally, actually, several years ago, attending the Salon d'Innovation in Geneva. I was very nicely surprised with the amount of young Iranian inventors who were presenting. Actually, I think they were in the range of 35 Iranian students or young inventors, let's say, who were presenting their innovations in this very important innovation exhibition in Geneva, which happens once every year in April. And this also demonstrates the potential of Iran, and hopefully we will have more cooperation with Iran in the future, as you've said, when hopefully the issues with Iran are solved and you'll be more active member in the international community, and South-South cooperation here will, I think, could be really be well established. And now we move to our only female panelist. Unfortunately, yesterday we had a very balanced opening session with gender balance in the opening session. I cannot say the same with our panels, so maybe this is one recommendation of the conference that we should put in mind, gender balance in science diplomacy. I'm very pleased to introduce here a dear friend, Hanan Dowidar, who is the Vice President of the Forum for Euro-Mediterranean Innovation in Action. She has MA in Political Sciences and Development Expert, having worked for international organizations, governments, educational and civil society organizations. Hanan started her career at the Egyptian Ministry of International Cooperation before joining the World Bank, working both in Washington, D.C. and its Cairo office. She then consulted for the Interparliamentary Union in Geneva, working as a Deputy Director of the EU-funded Research, Development and Innovation Program in Egypt. She gained first-hand experience on science and innovation policies and practices. She is currently Vice President for the Forum of Euro-Mediterranean Innovation in Action, FEMIA, an association aiming to employ innovation for sustainable development in the Mediterranean, and the Senior Advisor to 1001 Inventions, an award-winning UK-based organization that creates global educational campaigns. Dowidar is passionate about communicating science for development, where she introduced several initiatives in Egypt along the RDI program and as advisor to the president of the American University in Cairo on informal science education. Hanan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I note the gender balance, and I see that I'm the only female here. And we've received many emails on how strict the moderator will be on the 5 minutes. But noting that I'm the only female and doing a simple calculation, I think I should have 30 minutes because, you know, it's so. But anyway, I'm a big believer of gender equality and the equal rights of men and women. So I'll do my best to restrict myself to the 5 minutes, although I should be allowed about 30 minutes, but anyway. So I would like to start by giving you a little bit of a historical perspective. Maybe Dr. Hani Hilal also started with a historical perspective from World War II. I'll go a little bit back, thousands of years back, And in this illustration here, it's actually from a remarkable book called the Selenographia. It's on the moon and on astronomy. And in this illustration, it shows two giants, science giants, Ibn al-Haytham, who's a scholar from the Muslim civilization, and of course Galileo. And this would just give us a feeling of where we stand today, where the foundations of science were built on sharing knowledge and knowledge accumulation across civilizations. There were men and women of different cultures and faith working together for us to be where we are right now in terms of technological development. Where we are today, and if we're speaking about the information age, we don't have anymore the barriers of time or distance or language. These are all easy. The problems we have are all to deal with collaboration, with wanting to work together, with the will and the mindset of wanting to share our knowledge and to work together. We are facing many global challenges right now, and these challenges are not belonging to one nation. They are all global in their nature, and they definitely need collective solutions. And in these images, we see angry young people. They are from both borders of the Mediterranean. So we see angry young people in the south of the Mediterranean and angry young people in the north of the Mediterranean as well. Their anger stems from unemployment and from challenges, economic and social challenges. They have the right to be angry, but I think we need to use all the energy they have to harness their energy into positive endeavors. We owe it to them, we owe it to our future. And it's very important, the note I note from Dr. Zuhairi's talk yesterday, the immigrants, the migrants fleeing, and taking the dangerous seas. And yesterday, unfortunately, we heard of the 300 people who drowned in the Mediterranean, and it's not the first time. What I noted, actually, reading a little bit more about this incident, a representative from the UNHCR was saying this is an alarm for Europe, that they should not do too little too late, and they should have rescue teams instead of just rescuing those who are drowning. But I think this is a message also for us. It's interesting that we should not wait for them to go on the seas and take their dangerous challenge, whether they would make it to the other side of the Mediterranean or not, but we have to take action now and to prevent them from wanting in the first place to take the seas and just move from their countries into what they think would be a better future. And I think by helping, it's not just rescuing the lives that are important, whether they are from the north or the south. I think it's more of a clear message that what happens anywhere in the world definitely has its repercussions on other parts of the world. So we have to work collaboratively to solve our solutions and to deal with our challenges. We do have some solutions, and I think here we're speaking about science diplomacy. I think science comes in very handy. We all know that science offers a lot of solutions to the global challenges. But we have something that's more important. We do need to have a new generation of young scientists. We need, and I'll echo what was said in the panel before and by Professor Hani Hilal, that simply we need young people to be interested in science and technology and innovation. We want to inspire a new generation of those who would be interested to deal with their problems and to work on solving their issues and challenges. We need to inspire them to study science, technology, engineering, and math. We need a new generation who's willing to take over the challenges and deal with it, not to just be vocal opponents of the systems, but to be players and to be catalysts for development. It's interesting when we talk about science diplomacy and the different definitions that we heard yesterday and today. We talk about science as a solution for global challenges. And when we discuss diplomacy, there are many definitions. One of them Professor Ilan Chat yesterday shared with us. But maybe we can go a step further, and if we say science is about finding solutions for global challenges, maybe we could say that diplomacy is about connecting young people. And maybe a new definition that we would like to add to science diplomacy is connecting young people globally to solve common challenges. So basically, there are many initiatives that are happening that are inspiring young people to study science, technology, engineering, and math, and to hone their skills and to bring a new generation of scientists and engineers. The thing is, these are sometimes just working in one country, but we need for these initiatives to be bringing together young people interested in science to work together, and we have them to start having a mindset of collaboration from a young age. So I would echo also the remarks by, I think, Samar from Jordan before. It's very important to start with children and young people. This is just the future, and if they are not brought up with a mindset of collaboration and of working together, then as they grow up to become scientists or whatever they do in their lives, they will not want to communicate together. And unfortunately, with all the political problems we're having, I think these are stemming not actually from knowledge, it's stemming from ignorance. So it's our role to educate young people. And maybe changing curriculums is just a long-term process, and it will be difficult to attain on the short term. We have to work both at the short term and at the long term. So short term, maybe we can go into informal science education because it's much easier. This is something we can start tomorrow. This is something that, if we're talking about different, actions that could immediately be taken, it would basically be doing some more informal science education initiatives along bringing together young people, children and youth, high school students, university students together to work on collaborative efforts. Here I would just like to show you a few images. These are not from like the United Nations, or these are basically young people at different initiatives. Some of them are in Europe, actually. One of the initiatives is called the EU Contest for Young Scientists, I believe, EUSIS, and it brings together young people from European countries. It would be interesting, and maybe to take it as a concrete action, to have some sort of this, contest for the south and the north, to bring young people from both sides of the Mediterranean together. So it would be interesting to kill two birds with one stone. So instead, we are building their capacity to become the future generation of scientists and honing their skills, but at the same time bringing young people together from a young age to be listening to each other, to share their concerns, to share their challenges, and to find solutions together. So they need to learn from a young age to work together, and the only way to move forward is just by working together and listening to each other, not just listening to the media or listening to stereotypes. So we need to take action, and not just to talk about it, but we need to bring them together by immediate actions. And I think this is very attainable and very easy, and it's really on the short term. It's small steps, but maybe with a very strong impact. And we need to move forward now, but this is definitely the only way for us to have a better future. So it's short steps on the short run, but with strong impact definitely on the long run. I thank you, and I hope I kept my gender balance 5 minutes and gender equality, time limitations. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanan. I have a weak spot towards you, so I didn't stop you, but we took 10 minutes. Thank you very much for focusing on this very important issue on science diplomacy, but for youth. And I think you addressed this also from a very important position, that is, if we employ this energy of youth in scientific endeavors, and we connect the youth of different regions and different countries in scientific endeavors to address common challenges, I think we will definitely be addressing the challenges of the Euromed and employing science diplomacy for development and for prosperity. Thank you for your insights. And now I move to another friend. So as you see, I kept my friends to the last. Angelo Riccaboni is again a dear friend. We worked together for quite some time on developing initiatives which fall very much at the heart of science diplomacy. And I'd like here to say that these initiatives actually, this particular initiative that I'm sure Angelo will talk about is initiative of the EU. And I would like here to underline the role of the EU in not only providing platforms for collaboration between the EU countries and the other regions of the world, but also providing a very useful and functional platform for cooperation of South countries. And this is much needed. Unfortunately, we don't have our own, let's say, instruments and programs for South-South cooperation. So the EU here provides very valuable instruments for this to happen. Professor Angelo Riccaboni is the rector of the University of Siena. He's a full professor of management control systems at the Faculty of Economics and Management. He's the chair of the CRUI Foundation. Since we asked our speakers to limit their biography to 150 words, so I get a lot of abbreviations that I'm not familiar with. And he's the chair of the CRI Foundation, the operating body of CRUI, the Association of Italian Rectors. Professor Riccaboni is a member of the board of International Association of Universities, the IAU. He's a member of the Leadership Council of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network and chair of the regional center also of this network, the UN Development Solutions Network for the Mediterranean. Professor Riccaboni is also the chair of he is also chaired by Ministry of Universities and Research in Italy, appointment of the Prima General Assembly. Prima, this I will not even tell you what Prima stands for, but I'm sure Professor Riccaboni will tell you now what Prima, it's written. So it cannot be a mystery anymore. Okay, Partnership for Research and Innovation in the Mediterranean Area. Professor Riccaboni, 5 minutes please, not like Hanan, huh?
And I don't want to enter into the issue of a definition of a culture or scientific diplomacy. I just make reference to the position according to which nowadays science is a fundamental tool to tackle societal and environmental challenges. And also, I would like to stick with the position according to which now we need to go from research to innovation to adoption. We need to translate research into practical solutions, practical tools in order to help communities and enterprises also to create new jobs. As Muin said this morning, creating new jobs is a very important tool for dialogue and for diplomacy. So, and also for this reason, for this position, the University of Siena is coordinating the Mediterranean activities of UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is a network dedicated to finding concrete solutions. So the Prima initiative, as Hamid said just a few seconds ago, is an initiative which tried to give tools in order to tackle a major challenge, challenges related to food systems and water resources. And the point is that in order to tackle these challenges of food and water safety and security, you need an integrated approach. Huge challenges do not recognize national borders, so science should work together. We need financial, managerial, and scientific integration. Without these integrations, it is very hard to tackle such huge issues. And this is important for European citizens and for South and East Mediterranean citizens. For European citizens, because these results could help to achieve EU objectives, which are of competitiveness, creating a more inclusive, more sustainable, more healthy society. Also, the second point is that this is important because Europe, the EU, believes that cooperation is important. We want to be close to our neighbors, especially neighbors from the south and the east of the Mediterranean. And the third is important for Mediterranean citizens because we want that the brains are kept In those territories, we would like to have stability, we would like to have an increase in the number of jobs. So this is a project which aims at very ambitious goals. And for this reason, a lot of money is needed, but also a lot of political will. Unfortunately, we are getting both. So the problem is, as I said before, food and water safety and security. There are many projects were started in recent years, successful projects, many initiatives, multilateral, bilateral initiatives, and we all know the acronyms, other acronyms like MIRA, MedSpring, ARAMOT Med, IRAMOT 1, IRAMOT 2. So there are many initiatives, and we are very lucky, and this is the reason we want to go ahead with this project, because we are rooted in very strong initiatives. I mean, many important programs were held, and with friends like Hamid or Mouina Mzee or friends from SESAME, we have worked hard in order to build with other colleagues from all over the Mediterranean area this program. And the program, it is really relevant in our opinion because we want to give reality to the principles of co-ownership, mutual interest, and shared benefit. And what should be underlined is that this program is co-designed and co-financed. The point that there is an important funding by all the Mediterranean countries, Northern Shore, South and East Shore, is a very important point. This shows motivation. This shows the interest of these countries to participate on equal footing basis to the program. So the program is a program which wishes to tackle big challenges according to a strategic approach, long-term approach, in order to avoid fragmentation and duplication, in order to use resources in a better way, and as I said before, we deal with research, we deal with innovation, but we deal with adoption. Going from research to concrete results, going from research to tools to help communities and citizens and enterprises. So these are the basis of the program. The program, I have some hard copies of it, but also on the website of the University of Siena is easy to find it, but I'm here for the rest of the day, so I would be pleased to discuss with you those who are interested in the program. So, which is the state of the art of the program? After a very long process, which started in April at the Barcelona conference, last December, the program proposal was sent to the Commission. So now we are in this moment that after the conclusion of the preparation of the program, now the Commission started the analysis of the program, and as I said before, the goal is concerned with the development of solutions for food and water safety and security. And we have defined this project according to 8 objectives. Of course, I will not go with the 8 objectives, otherwise Hamid will throw something to me. But I mean, they are all related to food and water safety and security. And I just leave them for a few seconds just to show them. So for these objectives, we have defined initiatives, activities, capacity building programs, in order to make it clear that we would like to tackle the big challenges we are dealing with, going from research to innovation to adoption, as I said before. Funding is important, so according to the rules of the tool we would like to use in order to promote this program, and the tool is called Article 185, which is something really typical of the bureaucracy, but I mean, it's the article of the treaty dealing with these initiatives. So according to the rules, we needed to ask for financial commitment, and we were lucky enough to receive a commitment equal to 250 million euro cash by ministers of research and university and education around the Mediterranean and also from northern countries. And we are very pleased because this shows the interest of countries toward the program. The next steps, the submission was happened at the end of December. Now the EC should start the impact assessment. There's the opportunity of the World Expo in Milan, because of course it is a field, a topic related to PRIMA. And if the impact assessment is positive, the proposal will be submitted to the EU Council and the European Parliament, and then under the Maltese presidency in 2017, the course could be launched. It takes time, but Europe is always takes time. So, but I mean, to be effective is more important to be efficient in this case. So this is the story. I thank Hamid and EMUNI for giving me the possibility to present it. And then we take only 1 second to say that this is a long-term project, and we have a very short-term project, which is a conference, which will be held in March in Siena on these issues. Also, there is the presentation of PRIMA at the Expo, so maybe we could meet also at the Expo in Milan. And this will be a conference on these issues with the major speakers, like also Hamid, that I thank again for his hospitality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angelo, and I'm glad to also announce that University of Siena has joined the EMUNI network just yesterday, and this is news that EMUNI is very proud of, because University of Siena, of course, we all know, is one of the oldest universities in Italy. Thank you again, Angelo, for your presentation on PRIMA, the Partnership of Research and Innovation in the Mediterranean area. And I think this partnership, which is based on co-ownership, co-decision making for challenges of mutual interest and shared benefit, with co-funding from the South Mediterranean countries, is quite a challenging endeavor, and I hope all the best for this endeavor. And now, last but definitely not least, another dear friend who asked me not to introduce him like his whole biography, but I will introduce him in short again. I have to. Fouad Mrad, he's the Executive Director of the United Nations Economic and Social Community for Western Asia, ESCWA Technology Center. So he's the Director of the ESCWA Technology Center, which is in Amman, Jordan. He's an electrical engineer by education, has a PhD in electrical engineering, and he joined the ESCWA Technology Center in December of 2009. And before that, he also was at the American University of Beirut. And I know Fouad very well because he's a consultant to the Qatar Foundation for their Stars of Science program, which is a very interesting program, bringing in young people from the Arab world to present and compete for their inventions. And Fouad is quite an instrumental person for this program. And if you didn't watch him on TV, I would like you to maybe go on NBC and watch Fouad Mrad as head of jury for this program, because he's doing a lot to this program, I think, and he's inspiring a lot of young Arab youth. Fouad.
Thank you, Hamid, and that program you'll watch my friend Hamid being a very tough judge, because talking of science, he's a tough judge because it's a scientific program. And when he invited me to this program, to this event today, I'm saying science and diplomacy. I know you as a scientist, we talk a lot about science in this, setup, but now science and diplomacy, it's like, science being so straightforward, so correct about equations and models and numbers and objectiveness. And diplomacy, I don't want to label it with the, counterpart. It reminded me of like sweet and sour, science diplomacy. But sweet and sour, in Chinese, they found it to be a unique, great taste. If I want to localize sweet and sour for the Mediterranean, it'll be probably olive oil and vinegar. But I'll let you guess who's the vinegar and who's the oil among scientists and diplomats. Yes, I work for the UN, and I am a diplomat, and I have cholesterol, so you could you could guess how it got here. And the United Nations As you all know, I'm very happy to be sitting next to you because I need to work with you. Thank you for the coexistence here because this network is very important for us. As you know that the United Nations 70 years old this year, and by itself is a manifestation of diplomacy across all fields, whether it's science, telecom, transportation, and you could name it. ESCWA, which is Economic Social Commission for Western Asia, is part of the Secretariat that divided the world into 5 different commissions. And in Europe, there is ECE, which is European Commission for Europe, in Geneva. The most important thing that differentiates commissions in the UN, the only reason I'm defining this, I definitely don't want to take you into the spaghetti of the UN. And we're next to Italy here, so. But just to say that the commissions are differentiated from all the other work of the United Nations organizations, being mandated to convene the member countries. So the mandate of ESCWA is to convene the member countries, which are 17 Arab countries, around a position, whether it's water, climate change, or we can name a lot of them. So definitely ESCWA has been involved in the science diplomacy because that's the mandate for it. The Technology Center, which is a subsidiary of ESCWA, we have a board of governors that represent officially 14 countries. And I'm happy that Professor Mouin Hamzi here represents Lebanon on the board. And we have the Mouin Hamzis of the 14 countries in the region. In Egypt, we have the Academy of Science and so on. So the Technology Center exactly takes recommendations, and it takes any kind of convening expert group meeting and transforms them into action. And I hope to get to the action part in this conference based on Hamid's recommendation to get to a couple concrete steps we can do. We have already ICT for Leadership Academy. So anybody from the Arab countries who has a need, you could identify a gap where your leaders, parliamentary or ministry, whatever, they need to be updated on ICT knowledge. We have an ICT Academy for Leadership, for decision makers, because we're talking about cybersecurity and governance and this is a big problem today. We belong to a part of the United Nations that tried to avoid fires rather than firefighting or with firefighting. I know this morning in the panel there was a lot of talk about with all the fires happening, and you want to call it the Arab Spring or you want to call it the long polar winter. You could label it anything. But we have a huge problem in the region, and the United Nations has a big role is doing with the refugees and many, many other problems. But in the UN, we belong to the part that says we have to avoid fires as well as fight the fires. In the Charter of the UN, which is 70 years, there is a human rights, of course, and in there are 4 freedoms. And of course, you could guess freedom of expression, freedom of belief, freedom from fear, if we're talking about terrorism, and freedom from a need. And this is where science diplomacy can support a lot in the freedom from a need. I want to get to benefiting from what exists out there. And today, talking about the south and north rims of the Mediterranean, with everything that's available in the region. Everybody stressed education. Yes, education is very important. But when you graduate educated people, young people, and don't have the parallel infrastructure that is ready to absorb them, they become a load on the country, like it's happening in Egypt or in Tunis or. So supporting alongside the education, we need to do something more than that. And I call for the following. Beyond CSR, beyond corporate social responsibility, we need shared production values, this shared partnership between North and South. If the EU or USAID or the UN is helping directly many of the projects in the southern part or in the Africa, we're calling for these programs to encourage, give incentives for Boeing and whether it's Fiat or Peugeot or Siemens or. Give incentives for these companies to develop partnership in these regions. And the money, instead of giving it to people who are sitting to feed them, give the money to these companies as part of the compensation to make sure that these partnerships take place. Let's give a fair chance for the Middle East. Let's give a fair chance to the Arab countries and the Arab youth in creating jobs for them, creating jobs for the educated youth. So the headline would be Shared Production Value Program with the Private Sector. I want to give an example. You could look it up later because within the 5 minutes, there was a successful story in Jordan called QIZ, which is qualifying industrial zones that took place after the peace treaty. And when we looked at the number in the mid-90s, QIZ, or in Jordan, or what was exported from Jordan to the world, 90% of it came from those areas. That's a huge number for a small country. Then I jump for the other initiative I'd like to call for as a recommendation, as Hamid asked for, concrete recommendation. How can science diplomacy play a role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? Let us not waste more time on agreeing and negotiating and discussing what are the critical needs of the world or the Mediterranean countries or the Arab countries, European countries. Our countries have done that through the proper channels, through diplomats and mechanisms and networks. And they agreed on something called SDGs, beyond the MDGs for the world. 2015, in September in New York, the United Nations will adopt through its General Assembly the Sustainable Development Goals. These goals are 18 specific goals with 140 indicators how to march towards the 2030 vision that the Secretary General calls it human dignity. So we're marching towards human dignity in 2030, and there are 17 concrete goals. We'd like to see how can science diplomacy lens onto the landscape of the EuroMed help implement these goals. And we have a lot of work to do together, I hope. I don't want to list the 17 goals, but each word, each goal has its critical word. So there is poverty, hunger, health, education, women, water, sanitation, energy, economic growth, productive, sustainable employment, infrastructure, industrialization, inequality, cities, consumption and production, climate change, ocean and seas, forest and biodiversity, justice, last but not least, partnership. And today, I call on implementing critically this very important implementation-related goal, international partnerships. With you, with science diplomacy, private sector and the civic society can play a huge role to meet and attain the 17 goals or 16 goals through number 17, partnerships. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fouad, for these very concrete recommendations and insights into working beyond CSR, which I totally agree, that CSR is not sustainable. CSR depends on the economic situation of those enterprise. When the economy is not good, CSR goes down. So actually, I like more the term, instead of CSR, is CSIs, which is corporate social innovation, because then when the corporations integrate innovation into their main mission, then they know that they are making money from this, and in the same time helping through social innovation the communities. Also, your shared production values program, recommendation with shared production value program with the private sector is very well taken on board, and also applying science diplomacy to achieve the sustainable development goals. I hope that the sustainable development goals will not have the fate of the Millennium Development Goals of the UN, but we have to look forward to this. I will open the floor to our distinguished audience very soon. But before that, I would like to tell our panelists, I will give them one challenge. Since we are running out of time, and since I see that most of the interventions already have anticipated concrete recommendations, so they have anticipated their closing remarks, I will change a bit the format, and I will give you closing remarks to be given for each panelist in 3 words. So, and I'm telling you this now so that while the, exactly, we are in the Twitter age. So while we are listening to the questions addressed, you will have a chance to respond to some questions. If there are comments, then you just take them on board. If there are questions, you will have a chance to respond to some questions. But while doing this, just please consider your closing remarks in 3 words. It could be a long word, by the way, Angelo. So, like German, you know, in German language they have very long words. So if you can manage to put 4 words in one, you can use that. And now we open the floor. Professor Stanawi, please. And then Professor Hamze. And then
hello, my name is Mohammed Shatanawi. I am a professor of water resources and a UNESCO chairholder in hydrology. First of all, I would like to thank you, Dr. Hamid, for, I'm coming here for Mrad project, but he invited me to this conference. Actually, this conference was a good platform for me to learn a lot of things. But I have 2 comments and 1 question. You know, I am a water resources expert. Recently, the last few years, I was dealing with water diplomacy. So in water diplomacy, there are a lot of conferences that have been held, and there are a lot of books written by UNESCO and articles written in scientific paper. And I think we can get benefit from water diplomacy to use it as a science tool in the science diplomacy. The second issue, which is the title of this workshop, of this session, is diplomacy as a tool to enhance cooperation in science. And I give example how diplomacy really helps in gathering people, giving new ideas for projects. You know, I see that diplomatic people can create a lot of initiative, can create a lot of consortium to establish projects. Give you example, my friend Hamid, you know, these are people who are really have good communication in gathering people to have projects. So diplomacy is not only limited to general idea of diplomacy, but it limited to individuals who can benefit from that. The second issue, really, or the second comment, talking about certain initiative which has been really made after the 90s, was a Mrad project, which was American USAID project to enhance research and dialogue between countries in the Middle East to support peace. And there are really good examples of some projects, but really we want to evaluate this event. And I think EMO can do something like that. Also, I suggest that water diplomacy will be a subject for future conference or future workshop for EMI. And thank you very much.
Okay, so someone stands here and someone here, please, so that we... Okay, could you please give the microphone to Professor, first, ladies first, Dr. Eliezer.
I can wait.
ladies first.
Especially Eliezer.
Session and most interesting conference. I was just thinking what can we do in a practical way, maybe something you already thought or the organizer of the conference thought about, but I was thinking will it be interesting to create like a type of database of examples where science diplomacy or the universal language of science helped in the past to build trust, create bridges, increase understanding. And I am sure we have a number of these examples, small or big. Some are known, and some of them are mentioned many times here, and others are not known. And I think it will be interesting to create like a, like a database when these are mentioned. I also think that even if this conference focuses in the Med, we can learn from other areas of Europe where science played a big role, science diplomacy played a big role in areas that there is conflict and there is conflict for natural resources, etc. For instance, one of these examples is what is happening in the Arctic zone when there are a lot of countries, different societies with different cultures, then they have a share in a very important natural resource over there. And then I experienced myself how science really helped them to be together and then trying to find solutions. So I really think by doing that we make it a bit more concrete, because on one hand it's clear that defining science diplomacy is not that easy. Okay, there is the definitions we saw and you can on the screen and people found on the web. There are the definitions we heard yesterday, and there are maybe others. But even by listing the different definitions is maybe interesting. So I think just from all of this discussion, and of course I'm sure the conclusions we will have from the session will be interesting if we do something else, which just gets more and more interesting, and maybe people will spontaneously contributing to that by proposing new examples and new cases unknown to most of us. Thanks.
Professor Hamza, I will come back. Yes, I will come back. Do you have another microphone?
Thank you, Hamid. My question is related to my concern and most of the participants in this conference concerning the role of science and innovation in creating a new job. So I would like to ask directly Professor Angelo Riccaboni and Dr. Fouad Mrad, in your institution, in the university, in European university, famous European university like Siena, or at ESCWA, who's working with most of the countries in the Middle East, do you have any data about the role of science and technology in creating a new job, a fair job, either in Europe or in the Middle East?
Professor Chevelle, please. And then Professor Schools.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Chevelle. I'm from Israel. I'm the president of Ghadiri Institute, and I have a concrete proposal. But before I say I want to describe the proposal, especially to the UN here, I want to mention that I think it's well known that in Israel we successfully managed the desert, and we have expertise in water management. And I'm glad to tell you that in my institute, the Ghadiri Institute, we have people coming from 174 countries in the world to share the experience water management, also in agriculture. We have people coming from Western China because the desert is moving into China. We have people coming from Zimbabwe because the desert from Namibia is moving into Zimbabwe. And we have even from Chile in the desert and things like that. And some of these programs are jointly with the UN. Which are the countries that are not cooperating because of diplomacy? Of course, in the Middle East. And here I call, and maybe, especially to you, Mr. Fouad, maybe together we can develop. And we know that this is a major problem, as we heard here in Jordan, and of course in Egypt and other countries in the Middle East. And we can share the experience. And maybe under the umbrella of the UN, the Western part of the UN, we can develop a program. And not only that, I think that we can even come with resources and share. And by the way, we work, of course, with the UN, with FAO and other agencies of the UN. The only UN agency that we don't work is Western Asia, where Israel is located. So I think, I know that it's not easy, and we have political problems here. We have Iranian, and I hope that we have to be optimistic, because 30 years ago, Iran and Israel were very close friends. So who says that tomorrow it will not be? Also, if we are in Europe, we can learn from the European experience. I know that France and Germany were enemies for 1,000 years, and now they are, I don't think they still like each other, but they cooperate. But, so we have to be optimistic also in the Middle East. So this is my concrete proposal. We are ready to develop joint programs if we need. Maybe EMUNI could be the umbrella and enable us to work together, whether in Egypt or Jordan, especially in agriculture, which is so important, and water management. Thank you.
Professor Spoulos, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it works. Yeah. Michael Spoulos. I follow what Elizabeth said before, and I would like to mention a project I know well in the region, since I chaired the international panel of experts of the World Bank on the Dead Sea Canal. And this is something that was built almost entirely on science and technology. We don't know how well this project will fly or not fly. The issue is, first of all, that this was an effective way to bring the countries together. Even now, under difficult conditions, this never stopped as a project. The second, on the other hand, we need to analyze what actually we can learn from this kind of processes. And I think as both scientists and politically minded and diplomatically minded in this room, we need to bring the analysis, even if the analysis sometimes is pessimistic, we conduct policies in a very positive way. So we need to have this analysis as part of what we are doing here. Because just enthusiastic words is not enough to bring us to the next step. It's very important to base our knowledge on experiences and the analysis of these experiences, both positive and negative. Thank you.
Thank you. Claudio? See, I know all the participants now. Are you impressed? Because I don't know, you will not get them the floor.
Yeah.
And then Professor Nabil afterwards. Claudio.
Thank you, Amid, and I thank also Professor Shatanawi and Michael for really introducing the problem of the water diplomacy, because I think water today in the Mediterranean, as far as my personal view is, it is really at the heart of a lot of conflicts. Not only in the Mediterranean, we know also in the other regions, but in the Mediterranean, just because we are there today, it is at the heart of many conflicts. Although we realize that water it is at the heart of the conflict since many years now. Michael, you know that, I mean, 20, 30 years ago, we were already discussing the problem of water conflict in the Mediterranean. But the diplomacy, and although water could be a good example of water diplomacy, just there, the diplomacy failed up to now. Failed completely. Because we still have, well, we failed, not failed completely, but failed. Because the conflict is still there. And maybe we can really take again, okay, back to what I also was saying before this morning. Maybe the researchers, they should try to play in another game, in another way, and convey in another way also the information about what we really know about the water resources. Some conflicts are even due to the fact that, and I don't make any geographical references now, but some conflicts are even on water are even due to the fact that, I mean, there is no common understanding on the figures, on the cubic meters of water, on the real problems, physical problems of water. And this is also our fault from the researchers. But I mean, again, I say researchers and the political dimension, this diplomacy dimension, should really work together. So water. So let's take the example of water. How maybe a possible future you see forward, I mean, to the science diplomacy.
I would like to ask to Professor Riccaboni to stress how the role of Expo 2015 in this year on food will represent a concrete opportunity of diplomacy for dialogue and knowledge of different cultural systems, also in the field of education on food and health and job.
We have one last question, okay, two last questions. Professor Ghadiri, you want the mic? No, of course, you're my boss. Three last questions, and then, but just a second, Professor Nabil, please. Just one second. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, just a comment and a recommendation. I wonder if the component of promoting the science to the students, even at the level of the school, at the school level, is very important component to move the students away from the education and humanities towards the science itself. Because in Palestine, for example, we have graduates of around 75 to 80% who are coming from humanities. And at the same time, we have around 60 to 70% unemployment. So expect that. For example, for the education, we have around 40% from our universities are graduating from education, discipline. And at the same time, at the ministry level, the only available vacancies are around 2,000. So imagine we usually have around 40,000 applicants for 2,000 applications. So it's a good idea if you can add such a component, how to promote the science itself to increase employability in the future. Thanks.
Okay, the cooperation between the North and the South is not simply projects financed by organizations that have more or less a regional or global cooperation. Because I'm very much involved in cooperation between universities, between several universities in Egypt and several universities in Europe. Our partners in Europe are simply interested in having researchers coming from the South to do their work for their interest in the North. I haven't seen any university in the North when they get one of our students to do a master and PhD and ask him to try to solve one of the problems that exists in the South. I mean, the priorities in the South are different than the priorities in the North. So, I mean, they consider that the researchers moving from the South to the North, their main purpose simply is to cover the lack of enough researchers in the North to do the work that is of interest to the North. I think we should encourage the universities to do dual degrees and to choose project or research topics that are in mutual interest of the South and the North, and not simply to foster the research activities in the northern universities. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. I want to add on Fouad comment. I think I fully agree with you. CSR, CSI, as Hamid said, and partnership. I think there is, and I'm talking, you know, under the supervision of Reem. I'm not an economist, but I think there is actually new trends of having what we call the social economy. It's based on partnership between the owners and the workers, etc. I think there is a new concept that is prevailing actually, especially, I think you can explain better than me, which is called the social economy, that is looking for the benefit of the owner, of the investors, etc., but at the same time it has a social impact which will create jobs, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hillel, and thank you all for your insights and inputs into this interesting discussion. Now we are going to address a couple of questions very quickly that were addressed, I think, basically to Fouad and Angelo, and then we are going to go for our concluding 3 words remarks. And there is another question, by the way, addressed to Fouad, so you can address it. This we received via Twitter. So your Twitter fans are asking you, how can science diplomacy play a role in success of sustainable development goals? Maybe you need to, it is easier said than done, I'm sure, but if you can also clear this point with the other question that you have received, and then to Angelo, and then we go to the concluding remarks.
How can science diplomacy play a role in succeeding or materializing, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? That could be a huge conference by itself and a program, multinational for sure. But in every one of the 17 goals, there is a critical role that science and technology can play in support. And all these goals, by the way, are intertwined, that you cannot have health without education, and you cannot have climate change without agriculture and water and things like that. So I invite you all to visit the SDGs online, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. But to be specific and not to hold you long from lunch, I'm going to answer quickly 2 questions that were addressed to me. Dr. Hamzi, regarding how does innovation and technology support creating new jobs, specifically in the ESCWA or Arab countries, as we're calling it here. We have a publication online that analyzed the critical role of technology in creating jobs for the knowledge-based economy. And definitely the ICT played a big role in it. And what was shown that even the small success stories of ICT-based innovation, this is not really the multiplier effect we were hoping for. So yes, there were more rich people created, and in the Arab world, we're not looking for creating more billionaires. We have enough billionaires in the Arab world. The problem is we need more inclusive development. We need more participation in the growth. I'll give you one example, that there is one Lebanese innovator who made a game online, and he makes $1 million a month by himself, and he has 2 jobs with him. So for 3 jobs, income $1 million. He's a millionaire, but did we create more jobs in the economy? Again, WhatsApp was sold for $19 billion, and there are only 50 employees, I think. So we have to be pushing for more inclusive industrialization, honestly. In terms of the impact. There is a database for incubators and venture capital and science park in the Arab region. That database is on our website with name and what's their impact in terms of created jobs, SMEs started, and things like that. The impact of all this science, technology, and innovation initiatives in the Arab region will be discussed in Tunis in a regional expert group meeting in May to analyze the impact of all these innovation and technology parks that take place in the Arab region. Regarding the desert expertise and how we can benefit, I know diplomacy and political stability and relations is important so that you could map experiences, no doubt. But sir, you have very good relations with Egypt, you have excellent relations with Jordan, and these are two countries that suffer a lot from water problems, from desertification, and we want to see how did you map the best practices between Jordan and Israel. Let's see a good example there, and then hopefully when there is a general peace in the region and the diplomatic political relation is not a block anymore, we look forward for mapping experiences across the region. But you have an excellent experience. We want to see positive impact in Jordan. That's a specific example. We have Jordanian colleagues here. I live in Jordan, and I know the water problem, desertification problem. They have centers for water, centers for desert. And you have this excellent experience. Let's try to map it with Jordan first. And then the UN will be ready when the member countries are ready to map it across the region. Thank you very much.
Yes, very short. We ask for data about the role of research in increasing new jobs. I think this is an issue which is important for any country. And before it was mentioned, the acronym Curie. Curie is the Association of Italian Rectors, and I'm in charge of a project to collect these experiences in order to show also in Italy that it works. Because I mean, not everybody is convinced that it works. So just a proposal is that why don't we share this approach, and why don't we try to see if we can use the experience we are maturing about how to collect this data and these experiences with other countries like Lebanon, because that is very important, because too often we don't have data available to show that it works in practice, not just because there's some blah blah. That is very important in my opinion. But also the suggestion by Elizabeth to have a database with cases showing that trust and mutual cooperation comes after these projects. So we need to be more evidence-based oriented. And the second question was about the Expo. In Italy, of course, more than in other countries, because of the Expo, there's a wide debate on the role of food. So, of course, as an Italian, I feel this debate more than others. But I think it's the first time when you really talk about food and what food means for our identity and how we could manage in a better way food and loss of food. And I think that two concrete solutions are, first, I invite you to check a platform called Feeding Knowledge, which is run by SESAME. And in the Feeding Knowledge, you have all the proposals of researchers in terms of how to better use food and water. And the second will be the Charter of Milan, the Carta di Milano, which will be the outcome of the Expo, when principles and engagements will be taken by participating countries. So I think that there will be something concrete out of the Expo, I hope.
Yes, I'll connect quickly three comments that I heard. First, on Palestine. Palestine is not the only country that's having problems with the young generation not interested in science. I thought it was a problem in Egypt, but I've learned that it's a problem in Europe, in the US, it's all over the world. It's really a problem. Taking here the note about CSR and the corporate world, it's interesting actually in connecting with employment and job creation from Dr. Hani. It's interesting actually that I think corporates are much smarter than governments and international organizations. I'll give just a very concrete example. Siemens in the UK are sponsoring for the next 5 years 5 of the major science festivals in in the UK. Basically, it's for them, it's not CSR, it's they need to recruit a new generation of engineers. They're having problems in recruiting. And by recruiting smart engineers, they would make profit eventually. So there is no conflict between profit making and doing socially good. So it's all connected actually. So and maybe, I don't know if you want us to start now with our 3 words. Not yet. So I'll come back to my.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other
No, that's.
comments, or we start? You have a quick comment? Okay.
I
8 minutes, but
yeah. Okay. I want to mention that we should learn and learn and learn from each other's experiences. I think we don't know about each other's countries' past experiences in different science and technologies. We shouldn't invent the wheel again and again in the field of science and technology. And it's possible just through joint collaboration, joint activities. Thanks.
The 3 words or the?
If you have any comments, if you don't have.
I will make both. I will just make my 3 words and within a comment.
Then we start with 3 words.
Okay, I think I propose 4 points, not 3, German-style words. I think scientific minded, politically minded scientists are very important to be part of this. You will never be able to access through just pure politicians. So I think you need to hire scientists to become politicians. Direct access for the beneficiaries, the final beneficiaries, that's very important. Don't rely strongly on the intermediate structures. You really need to access the people, especially for the education, for example. Just make it to the last beneficiary, the students. Because sometimes you lose a lot of benefits if you don't really go directly to the last audience. Shared benefits, that's very important. I think it's very unhelpful and it's destructive to the morale of the beneficiaries if it's one way. Europe helping the South, but the South is not helping Europe. It doesn't make sense. It should be equal. Actually, Europe was always benefiting more than the claim. So why don't we just admit it? It needs just stronger personnel from the South to make it very clear. We shouldn't be hesitant and behaving as if Europe is just helping. It should be just equal footing. That's very important, I think, because if you feel you are producing, then you will change the policy. But if you are just getting, you will never be able to influence the policy. And a last one, I think, for the EMUNI, you should focus. Thank you.
Okay, I will also do the both together. And you know, scientists don't obey authority, but I will obey your guideline of being very short. So first, deeds, not words. I think that if one succeeds in SESAME, building quality science, showing the area that it can do high quality science, it would be an example and it would draw also the younger people to science. Second, I would say support quality basic science. Appreciate that it is the engine. I know that the countries want to solve water, sewage, all these problems are immediate. But without building up a generation of high quality basic scientists, you will always rely on somebody from outside. You won't generate your own.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do I have the last word? Final? Okay, great. Well, I would like to go back to my comment about the question, are diplomats really necessary? They are not hopeless or useless. I consider diplomats as custodian of national interests, and you cannot put a premium on national interests. Okay? Now, technology, I mean, I compare technology to the Hydra monster which confronted Hercules. Every time you cut off one head, 2 heads would sprout out. So we are all back into the kindergarten. We are learning, we are in education, so we deal with training. Technology has uses and abuses. So we have to be careful. I haven't heard any word today about the negative impact of technology or science. We have a nuclear proliferation. We have seen the horror of chemical weapons in Syria. So we have to look at the advantages and disadvantages of a discipline or of an area. Technology, again, we talk about cyber security. I look at the keyboard as a smoking gun, which can create many problems. So we are talking today about environmental diplomacy. We're talking about digital diplomacy. Even we have recently seen examples of funeral diplomacy. Where are you going, Mr. President? Well, I'm going to participate in a working funeral. So we have to be careful about the uses and abuses of the technology. I remember a story about a diplomat who wanted to go on holiday to the Caribbean. So he asked his wife to join him, and she didn't feel like going. So ended up going on his own, spent 2 weeks enjoying the sun, the wine, etc. Came back after 2 weeks. He was surprised to see his wife not waiting for him at the airport as usual. He went home and saw a note left for him on the desk. Don't ever try to contact me. I'm filing for divorce. The man missed his wife when he was at the Caribbean, and he sent her an email saying, I wish you were here. So he missed his wife, poor man. Came back home. There was this note saying, don't ever try to contact me. I'm filing for divorce. So he didn't know what he did. Went to his computer, started reading his messages, and he was shocked to read his email saying, I wish you were here. Thank you very much. So you have to be careful when you send messages and realize the consequences of such email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ayad. And maybe on this last interesting note, we would leave the session here unless someone really has only 3 words. So, 3 words. Very good.
Yes, thank you. For the first time, what is good for the environment can be also good for companies. We should take this opportunity.
Informal science education.
Share, collaborate, learn.
Well, commend EMUNI for taking such a great initiative.
May I just a final word. I think this has been a very productive session. I really personally enjoyed it myself, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of also the audience and the panelists. A few quite interesting remarks and suggestions and concrete proposals were mentioned here. Just to highlight just to highlight a few of them. I'm not going to try to synthesize our recommendations now, but because we will need more time. But it was mentioned, I think Professor Rabinovici said that, talked about, is it top-down or a bottom-up approach? And it's very clear in my mind that it can only work both ways. It's a two-way street. We have to provide top-down frameworks, but then the scientists themselves have to have the interest to work together. And I think this is very well the case of SESAME, for instance. It is both top-down and bottom-up, because if the countries come together, provide this investment, and Professor Rabinovici and Professor Salman are not interested in working together, it will not work. After all, this investment will be a big loss. So, and this is science diplomacy in practice. It has to go both ways. I think we had also a lot of interesting presentations. I personally also like the way Hanan presented in her first slide Ibn al-Haytham's contribution to the this is the Islamic contribution to the world science heritage. this is very important to capitalize upon. Such initiatives are useful both for Europe and for the South countries. For Europe, they bring in some moderate and interesting face of Islam that probably Europeans don't know. And for the South countries, they engage the youth into productive scientific endeavors and prevent them from falling victims to extremist ideologies. In very short words, I think this is a very good model, this displaying scientific heritage. It's like an intercultural bridge by itself. I also have here some interesting recommendations. I will not try to be comprehensive and mention them all, but I will mention some of them that I would like to comment upon very quickly. The suggestion by Elizabeth Lipiato for database of best practices and success stories in science diplomacy. I think this is a very good one, which Michael Scholl has added to also, that we need to learn also from our failures, and I totally support this view. And maybe this could be an initiative to develop. And here I remember another EU project, the SI Drive, where our colleague Antonio Schroeder is here, and we are supposed also through the SI Drive to develop this database of social innovation initiatives. Along that same line, I think this could be also interesting in science diplomacy. We will gain a lot of knowledge from this. It will help us also designing programs and instruments in the future to know what works and what doesn't. So I very seriously take that on board, and EMUNI can also play a role in maybe establishing this database. Joseph Chevel also offered this his help under ESCWA, which I hear this is not a recommendation for EMUNI, but maybe a recommendation for ESCWA. I think ESCWA is more capable of running this initiative. It's not a political statement. It's so those of you who are smiling, or I think ESCWA is more capable under this, and I think it's a very good initiative also to have. Maybe EMUNI could also be integrated when it comes to the level of programs to be implemented, to share from the experiences. Hanan, I take your 3 words very seriously: informal science education, and you have very concretely also suggested a program along the model of the EUSIS, the EU competition or contest for young scientists. I personally went to two EUSIS competitions, and I think it's a very good idea. And having a Euro-Mediterranean EUSIS, this is by itself a science diplomacy initiative, which I think should be explored. Fouad, shared production values program with private sector involvement is also quite a valid suggestion. Water diplomacy, which I was touched upon and was also tweeted by Nart, by the way, your colleague from ESCWA, is another very important, because this is one of the main challenges. Of course, PRIMA here also plays a role. When we're talking about food security, we're talking about agriculture, then water comes as, of course, the main element of agriculture. So PRIMA could also play a role in water diplomacy. Political mandate scientists, Salman has mentioned this more than one time, and it made me think, do scientists have to possess some skills in politics, some skills in diplomacy? I would like to just here make a delineation between 2 types of scientists, because I'm supposed to be a scientist, but I stopped practicing science for so long, and I'm more and more practicing diplomacy now. So I think that scientists should work in labs and work together in research endeavors. And then there is another group which, unfortunately, apart from the US, are not highlighted very much, which are the science, technology, and innovation managers. And this is what I consider myself. I'm a science, technology, innovation manager. I'm not a scientist anymore. I'm a manager of science. So this production, I mean, we need to to focus on producing these science, technology, and innovation managers to help us in both science diplomacy and managing the results of science and innovation, so that we can avoid, like Nabil said, the negative aspects of technology on one hand, and try to capitalize on the positive aspects of science and technology. At the end of this panel, I would like to very much thank the panelists who have very much enriched the discussions, and also the audience who have gave us insights and very helpful and valuable comments. We are running 20 minutes late, but we also, I think, started 20 minutes late. So I would like now to thank my panelists again, Professor Nabil Ayad, Professor Rabinovici. I'm sorry, it's difficult to pronounce. Professor Eliezer Rabinovici, Professor Salman, and Dr. Ghadiri, Hanan Dowidar. I'm calling you with first name because you're my friends, Angelo Riccaboni, and Fouad Mrad. Please join me to thank all our panelists tonight. We invite you for lunch now, and please, we would like to be back precisely at 16 hours, 4 p.m. for the last panel of today. Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, yes.
Thank you. Enjoyed your moderation. Thank you very much for the exhibit. Well done.